Hello everyone, I am JJ Dixon with the Jacksonville Brotherhood of Police Officers, and we are continuing on with our Black History Month series. Today we're honored to have someone who is extremely well known around the city of Jacksonville, Florida with us. I probably don't even need to say the name because you already see his face. Everyone knows Ken Jefferson. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you.
And thank you for coming. And Ken is a member of the Brotherhood, so you're no stranger to us and we're no stranger to you. But we just wanted to find out a little bit more about you. We've seen you out and about around the city, around the sheriff's office first, and then around the city for years. And we just want to find out a little bit more about you. So tell us, are you from who are you?
Well, thank you for having me on the show, Juanita. It's truly an honor to be here and to participate in this. I'm born and raised right here in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm one of 7 children from my mother and father. We grew up on the north side.
Now, where are you in number?
I'm number 2.
Oh, up there at the top.
But I'm number 1 now because my oldest brother is deceased.
Sorry
I am the oldest of the 5 of us that's remaining.
Okay.
And we came up through the rough in Jacksonville, came up through Washington Heights, 4229 Moncrief Road, apartment number 157. And the reason we landed in Washington Heights is because we lost our house. We lost our home. And so you can imagine a family of 9, when you count my mother and the father, having to move out of a 3-bedroom home and move into a 2-bedroom apartment. So the family was split. A couple of my brothers went with the godparents, and the rest of us stayed there in the apartment. But let me tell you how I became involved with law enforcement. From 5th grade. My mentor was, God bless his soul, Marvin Young, Officer Marvin Young.
So many officers have come through here that have said that, and that's why I can recite it with you, because I felt it coming on. He was truly an inspiration to a lot of people.
He was, and I met Officer Young because he was involved in the Officer Friendly program. He came to my 5th grade class, Rufus C. Payne Elementary School, and told us about the role of a police officer. Now, don't get it misconstrued. We understood the role. You break the law, you go to jail. We understood that part. He didn't have to explain that part, but he talked to us about the role that the officer plays in the community by being a fixture, being a role model, being someone that the community looked up to. And when you're sleeping at night, he's out there making sure the streets are safe. When I heard his message that day in 5th grade, I raised my hand right then and there and said, I'm going to be a police officer when I grow up.
Wow.
So much so that I went to Mr. Madison's office, I was the principal at the time, and signed up for school safety patrol.
Wow.
So I guess my law enforcement career spans for about 60 years if you count elementary school experience.
And I bet you were a tough safety patrol too, weren't you?
No, I was a little mellow. I enjoyed stopping the cars and letting the kids walk across the street. I just thought that was the greatest thing because we had no school safety, crossing guards at the time. We were the crossing guards. We had these long pole flags where we walked down the street and held them out and traffic stopped.
Couldn't tell you nothing.
I just thought that was the coolest thing. So much so that I held the cars too long and the teachers had to pull me off the street.
Now let me ask you this, because we hear a lot of stories from officers who joined because they wanted to make a difference and help their community, and they always say that their vision of officers was one thing. So had you heard that police officers were your friend and they were your protectors and they were the ones that were up at night when you were asleep? Had you heard that before, Mr.
Absolutely. And we're talking about back in the 60s when a lot of things was going on in society. A lot of racial things was going on and a lot of inequality and civil rights issues was going on. However, we always respected the police. We were taught to respect the police. If you got lost, find a police officer, or if there was one, find a police officer. Now, this will date me, but, there was no 911. You dialed the 0, and it was on a rotary dial.
That's right.
And you got to wait for it to come all the way back around, and then you got to wait for somebody to answer. Totally different today from society. But when Officer Young came into our 5th grade class, before he came in, we were all over the place. As you know, the rest of the 5th graders in there, we're doing all sorts of things, throwing spitballs, doing all kinds of stuff. When he walked in, he didn't say a word. But his bearing and his presence, his command presence said it all without him opening his mouth. We all found our seats quietly and sat attentively because we were taught you respect that man in that uniform because he's your protector. He is a friendly person. Don't be afraid of him, but go to him if you need him.
Wow, amazing. So you got the itch for law enforcement early on in life, and then as you went on through school, when did you really commit yourself to law enforcement? Like, this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it now.
I knew from 5th grade that that's what I wanted to do, and it was more of a calling than an itch. It was something that was innate within me because I went to sleep thinking about it, I woke up thinking about it. That's defined as a purpose.
Yeah.
So it was my purpose to be there. Went through elementary, junior high school, enrolled in what we call FJC then, which is FCCJ now. Enrolled there and working various jobs during that particular time. I was not old enough at that time to be a police officer. And during that time, you had to do at least 6 months as a corrections officer before you would even consider being a police officer. So I became involved early on in corporate America. So I actually come from corporate America before I became a police officer. But it was always there. It was always there. And, you know, coming up, you have certain people that you look up to and you respect their opinions and their thoughts or whatever, even though some of those people that I respected and looked up to was talking negative about becoming a police officer, just because of, in their minds, a danger sake, not the fact that I wanted to be one that was trying to kill my dream. And I respected them and I looked up to them. That kind of stalled my process. Personal process of pursuing it right then and there. So I evolved in corporate America, working for insurance companies, became the top salesman in 2 insurance companies, was doing very well. Then the opportunity came. Now mind you, in corporate America, GSO wasn't paying what corporate America was paying. So I had to make a decision. But I realized it wasn't about the money for me. It was my calling. It was my purpose. This is what I'm supposed to do in society and in life. So I left corporate America and came on the sheriff's office in 1986, August of 1986.
And well, let me first say that I have met so many policemen who say what you just said, like, this is not about the money for me because I made more money at my last job that I make here, but this is what I want to do. I want to be able to help people and that kind of thing, and so they make the transition. So by the time you came on in 86, there was no longer the criteria that you had to be a corrections officer, right? So did you?
Well, I actually worked in corrections.
That's what I was going to ask you. Did you do any time in corrections?
I started in August of 86, working in the jail.
The old jail.
The old jail on the waterfront. But I worked there, I didn't have to work 6 months. I worked there for a short period of time. And during that time, there were guys, corrections officers within the jail that was still trying to get to the academy because they wanted to be police officers and go on the street, whatever. But I was fortunate because I was in the class, the first class, that was what we call the 50-50 class. You know, it was racially divided right down the middle to have the department reflect what the community looked like. You know, according to GSO accreditation, national accreditation standards, it said that you had a 30% population of underutilized classes of people. That includes African American, Asian American, Indian, Hispanics, and whatever. And your department is supposed to mirror what your community looked like. So they weren't accredited at that particular time. However, they were trying to follow that guideline prior to accreditation. So I was in that first class where it was split right down the middle. And before we even got to the class, there were some other patriots, if you will, Anthony Rogers and a few others. that huddled us together. George Marshall huddled us together and said, okay, listen, this is what you have to expect on your entrance to try to get qualified. That was a 1.5 mile run and the push-ups and the sit-ups and all that kind of stuff, pushing the car, all those things. So they took us, they had us, and then they talked about the written exam as well. They mentored us on all of that stuff to try to help us out, give us a heads up.
I'm smiling because that almost sounds like the Brotherhood, but go ahead.
Yeah, more or less. Didn't know anything about the Brotherhood at that time.
But that's what they were doing, yeah.
And so they told us to meet them at William Raines High School, and we did, and said, okay, let's get on the track. Cold turkey.
Oh,
just
Lord.
Run 6 times around
Coming
the track.
from corporate America.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I tried to stay in shape, so that wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
But when I started running, I said, I want this, I'm going to get this, I'm going to do this, I'm not going to stop. You had guys throwing up and falling out and whatever. I felt like it, but I didn't stop. I did it, and that actually helped me a whole lot when I actually got on Huffman Boulevard and had to do it
for
to
real.
qualify, because my wind had built up, my stamina was good, so that was a great help. And then former Sheriff Matt Glover, who was a deputy director at the time, when we qualified at the academy, doing the run and all those things we had to do, he was there at the finish line rooting us on.
Wow.
He was there rooting us on to make sure, one, that we get a fair shot, and two, that you got he letting us know you got somebody in your corner that's here rooting you on. Never forget it. That's awesome.
I've spoken with a few different officers from back in that, like in the 70s, 60s and 70s actually, and they said that they felt kind of alone because they didn't have that. They didn't have any, supervisors on that level, like, chiefs and captains and things of that nature who were able to do that for them. So, and Glover really was one of them.
Well, high-ranking officials was scarce at that particular time. Sheriff Glover was the deputy director. That was before they had abolished that position. He was a deputy director, then you had the director. Because if you remember, the hierarchy was sheriff, undersheriff, director, deputy director, chiefs, and that was it as far as appointed officials. Everything below a chief was the captain, lieutenant, sergeant.
Right, and you had to test for all those.
Right.
But I said that to say it's good to know that because of what Sheriff Glover and some of the others went through, they saw a need to be supportive of, those of us that were coming on, and they were there at the finish line, literally for you all to see that they were there to support you.
Absolutely.
So that's amazing. So you got into the sheriff's office, and I heard you say something about accreditation. Didn't you work in accreditation at one time?
I did.
Yeah, what was that like?
So I worked in several positions. I actually had 9 different positions within the sheriff's office during my tenure. I worked as a patrol officer, of course, riding the beat, answering calls for service like we all did.
Yeah, we all did.
From there, I went to the police academy as an academy staff instructor.
That's right, you did.
Stayed there for a while. From there, I went to the inspections and accreditation unit, and I stayed there for 5.5, 6 years. We were responsible for writing and amending all of the directives, the general orders and operational orders. Your report writing manual, all those things, we had to redo everything. So I was in on the ground floor.
It's a lot of work.
There was a committee called DRC, Directive Review Committee. And
I remember that.
When we would change a general order or amend one, we had to know the process of drafting. It's kind of like city council.
Yeah, doing legislative work.
You got to draft it. You got to take it before the committee. You got to sell it basically as to why you want it, unless a high-ranking authority wanted it changed in their department or whatever. There was no selling involved with that. It was pretty easy peasy with that. And in 1992, I was a part of the first accreditation team that went to Biloxi, Mississippi, where we were awarded national accreditation.
Congratulations.
During that particular time.
Congratulations. That's a little known history fact.
Yeah, that was a great experience having to do that. I mean, there were times, and people didn't know this, there were times we would start at 7 in the morning and not finish till 8 that night, and then come come back the next day and repeat that process, because we had 944 standards that we had to come into compliance with. And then with those standards, you had to have what we call secondary documentation to prove you do what you say you do and meet the criteria to be accredited. So it's a big deal.
Yeah.
And now, it's my understanding that JSO is triple accredited.
Wow.
It's a triple crown.
Wonderful.
You got police, corrections, and administration.
All of them, yeah.
I was happy to be a part of that first team.
So let me ask you this, and I know that was back in the 90s, but since I've had an opportunity to work in government, state government, I know that when legislative work is done, there's not really one body that does it. Like, you have a legislator who has an idea, for example, to change something. And then you have another group of individuals that do all the research and the background work and blah, 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 and they get it together and they shuffle it back, put it together in words, and they, shuffle it back over to the legislator. Did you all have any help with that?
It's pretty much the same concept. The only difference is we were the ones that put it together and did the research and presented it. And so our reward was traveling to Biloxi, Mississippi for a week during that conference.
That was the reward?
Participating in it. Well, part of the reward, the real reward was being accredited, nationally accredited. But for our hard work or whatever, and we're the background singers.
Yeah,
so, we don't shine. The agency and the sheriff shine. We're the background singers. We did all of the footwork. So they allowed us to travel with them there to share in that experience. So that was kind of the reward. That was in 1992.
Do you remember, and maybe you don't, but do you remember how many employees that the sheriff's office had at that time?
863.
Wow. Okay.
Well, that was sworn.
That was just
just sworn.
Just the police side.
Just sworn. So you had under 2,000 total when you talk about corrections involved and then your civilians.
But I guess I'm thinking in my mind that was a lot of work to get that many people in compliance.
It was. We started in 1990 and we were accredited in 1992.
Still not bad. Not bad at all.
It was a lot of work, but it was well worth it.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. So that was one of the rewarding moments in your career. Can you think of another one? I know you work with the youth.
Yeah.
And that was one of your rewarding moments too, right?
It was. So I'll line them up.
Okay.
Started in patrol, writing a beat, answering calls for service. From there, went to the police academy as an instructor, academy staff instructor. From there, I went to inspections and accreditation, stayed there for a while. From there, I became a burglary detective, crimes against property. From there, I became a sex crimes detective, investigating crimes against persons. I was being heavily recruited for homicide, and I turned it down twice. And the third time, I said, okay, I'll do it. However, the recruiter's position came open. And it was a highly sought after position because you had an opportunity to sell the agency. And corporate America prepared me for that, selling. So I applied to be the recruiter, and I had to compete against 9 other people that wanted it, and I was fortunate enough to get it. And one of my pitches was, when I would visit these different academies and whatever, I said, listen, you come to the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, the premier law enforcement agency in Florida, where everybody wants to ride with the big dog. We are the big dog. We're going to provide you with everything you need except for socks and underwear. Who wants to come?
You sound like a salesman.
That was one of my pitches.
Sounds like a salesman.
That was one of my pitches in 88.
Everybody's hand went up.
Oh yeah, they wanted to come to Jacksonville.
Well, and because back then everybody really did want to come to Jacksonville. They did.
Not just on a local level, but I traveled as far as Atlanta, Georgia, recruiting people. But so I did that for a minute, and I came up with, at that time, I'm glad you brought that up, at that time, it was hard to recruit minorities. And my job was told to me, we need you to go out and get some minorities because it's hard. And if you recall, years before I became the recruiter, they had an ad in the paper that said, blacks need only to apply. Can't get away with that these days. You can't do that, but that's what it was at that particular time. But my marching orders was find the underutilized classes of people. And what the problem was, JJ, was you had to finance yourself through the academy. And a
Yes,
lot of
that's
people
right.
could
Couldn't
not
do it.
afford that. So I came up with a minority sponsorship program where I had organizations to give scholarships. I did all the legwork
did not know that.
on the front end. That was under Sheriff Club. I did all the legwork on the front end that we would normally do during the process. And what I mean by that is background investigation, polygraph,
Right.
physical abilities. I did all that on the front end so that when I found a candidate, I can go to the sponsor and say, this person is
They're ready.
qualified, and we guarantee to hire them once they pass the academy, once they go through the academy. So you had to have some kind of return on your investment
That's right.
on the front end, and I recognize that. So I met with pastors because I got a lot of people out of churches. Believe it or not, I would visit their Sundays. Sometimes Sheriff Glover and I we would go together. I went to corporate America from where I was from. People that was interested, and once it got the rolling, I didn't have to go to too many places because they were calling me. They were blowing my phone up. So there have been some that have come through that minority sponsorship program that got hired, retired as chiefs.
Wow.
Retired as chiefs. They did the entire career. They tasked me, say, find us two. And let's get it, well, I couldn't find two. I found 25.
Wow.
So I had a waiting list. They could only hire so many at the time, but they had a waiting list, and every year we pull off of that waiting list, or actually every 6 months we try to pull off from there. So that was a recruiting job. After recruiting, I became a federal program director in charge of the drug education for youth.
I remember that. DeFi, right?
DeFi. DeFi was a program where it was a part of if you remember, the weed and seed program. You go into certain areas, targeted areas, and you weed out all the bad, all the crime in there. But after you weed it out, what you gonna put in there? Because you still got young people there that's being influenced some kind of way or the other, because they were previously being influenced by drugs, prostitution, alcohol, being a drug dealer, not really knowing how to set goals and things of that nature. They called them underprivileged kids, so they targeted children between the ages of 9 to 12, and it was for a specific reason why they targeted that. And they would allow you 40 children per year to be in this program. It was similar to the DARE program, very similar, drug awareness, resistance education, very similar but different, because with this program, we partner with the military. So every year, I would take them to the base at Mayport Naval Station base, and we stayed on that was their summer camp.
Wow.
We stayed there for a week, and we taught them structure, we taught them discipline, we taught them goal setting, we taught them how to respect one another. I would partner with the soldiers. They taught them how to march. They taught them how to keep their space clean. Some kids didn't even know how to make up a bed, or didn't have to make up a bed.
Wow.
But we got reports from parents when we released it, said, what did you do to my child? The first time I got that call, I'm like, oh, Lord, what has happened? He's making up his bed, he's putting his shoes up, doing all kinds of things. And unfortunately, we lost a couple after that program was, after they got out of the program, because they went right back into that same environment. When I say we lost them, they weren't killed or anything, but they went back in and they adapted to the environment.
But you know what they say, though, once you instill it in them, even if they go back to the way that they were at some point in life, it'll come back.
It will. Train them up where they're supposed to go, and they won't depart from it. So after that position, I became the PIO in 2003 under Sheriff Rutherford. He was elected in 2003.
And I think that's what you're most known for throughout the community, obviously because you were on TV all the time.
With that position comes the notoriety, because you're involving the public and you're involving the media in everything that you're doing.
And wasn't it you all that had the Wheel of Justice? Do I remember that correctly? That was you had the Wheel of Justice. Tell us what the Wheel of Justice was.
So the Wheel of Justice was similar to Wheel of Fortune. But
something
you
like
can
that.
surmise it as a real unfortunate because the faces that was on there were wanted and wanted for various crimes, anywhere from homicide to petty theft. You know, and every Wednesday I would be on TV and we would spin the wheel and see who it lands on, and that would be the feature person of the week. And there was always a reward out. So anybody knows where this person is, contact the police, and you'll get a $1,000 reward. It was a $1,000 reward.
And was that a pretty successful program, you think?
No, I know it was very successful. I'm going to tell you why I know it. It's because there were more than one time where the phone was ringing at the station before I even left the station after we aired it, giving information, and we directed them to Crime Stoppers, number one. Number two, I've had more than one person turn themselves in to me at the police station as a result of it.
Wow.
Number three, a lady was watching and she saw her daughter's fiance that was wanted. Not only did she call her daughter, she called me, and I called the unit to where he was, and they picked him up. So it was very, very successful. You know,
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh.
that's okay, but you know,
Yeah, I would have saved my daughter from that one too.
yeah, that was a red flag. That was a red flag. But I was fortunate to be the PIO for 5 years, and I won PIO of the year back to back in 06 and 07.
And when you say of the year, is that local or
statewide?
Statewide. Wow.
And I was the only one in the state of Florida ever to win it back to back.
Wow.
Or
Congratulations
more than once.
again. Here we go.
Thank you. So
Yeah.
all of that helped propel me post GSO, if you will.
Right.
So after I was the PIO, I went to community affairs and was a crime prevention officer. So that was 24 years of work.
Of service.
And you know what? It never felt like work. It never felt like work.
Because you said it from the beginning, it was a calling.
Yeah, it never felt like work.
If it was a calling, then all you had to do was just go and do what you were called to do.
Yeah, and there were a few bumps here and there, which everybody experiences from time to time, especially if you're riding the beat on the street and whatever.
Yeah.
But overall, God blessed me to be there for 24 years. We all managed to walk away, retire, and not looking back at all.
Yeah. It was a good time. So after you left the sheriff's office, we know that you run for sheriff, and this is going to air, be posted on our YouTube channel, so there will be people from all over the world. So that's why I bring this up, because some people may not know, but we know that you ran for sheriff, and I'm just kind of curious to know, not just you, but anybody who does it, because it definitely takes a lot. It takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes, you have to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Committed to your community. I mean, it just takes a lot to do that. What made you, or kind of catapulted you to want to take on a task like being the sheriff?
It was all a part of what I envisioned in 5th grade. Not just selling to be one part of the sheriff's office or one part of a police officer. I think the word that you were looking for is courage.
That's the word I was looking for.
That's a daunting task. It's not for the faint. It's not for the weak. Politics is dirty. It's nasty. And people think the more I bring you down, it lifts me up, but it really doesn't. It really doesn't. It's all about turnout.
Right.
It's all about voter turnout. The first time I ran, I never intended to run against the incumbent, because the incumbent had said on numerous times that he had done 2 terms, he wasn't running again. And when I filed to run, he had not filed. And at the last minute, John Rutherford put his name in the hat and ran again before they came down with the rule that, hey, you're termed out. It applies to constitutional officers as well. But it was too late. It was too late. And I was predicted to get 8% of the vote, because I was an unknown commodity at that particular time as far as politics were concerned. known in Jacksonville and the surrounding community, but as far as politics
Right.
is concerned, he was a two-term, at that time, a two-term sheriff, popular in the community, well known.
Yep.
Easy for him. So I was predicted to get 8 to 10% of the vote, but I got almost 40% of the vote the first time. So when he realized that he couldn't run again, he finished his term out and he ran for Congress. So that opened up a seat again. And that's the closest, at that time I ran was the closest I came to becoming the sheriff, because I lost by 2 percentage points. For whatever reason, we have our thoughts and ideas, but it did rain on election day, and that has a tremendous effect on voter turnout. But 49% to 51%.
Wow.
So all you need is 50% plus one vote, not 51%, but 50% plus one vote. And I congratulated my opponent that night, and eventually began to work with him on some things after that. During that time. But the main reason I wanted to run for sheriff or become the sheriff is because I just wanted to continue serving. I just wanted to continue serving in that particular capacity. Number one, to expose the agency to the community in a different light. Kind of like we're seeing a little bit now with transparency. With accountability, with doing it the right way, in my opinion. So those were my motivating factors.
Wow. Well, the word that I was looking for was courage. And like I said, for anybody who runs, because I've seen races with, unopposed, and then races with 6 or 7 individuals who run. And some of them know that or at least they expect that they won't win. But just to have the courage to do it, to put your ideas out there, to let people know that you think that there are things that could make the community better, whether you get to implement them or whether you get to pitch that idea to somebody else. I think it's important for us to follow our dreams. And so along those lines, if you could say anything to young people, and I can give you a minute to think, but if you could say anything to young people about following their dreams and not giving up, and even if it looks like, you're going to get 8%, don't give up. What would you say to young people? I mean, when I say young, I mean children and teenagers.
Well, I don't need a minute to think about it. I appreciate it, though, because I face some of those obstacles. That's why I don't have to think about it. I face some of those obstacles, knowing what I wanted to do, knowing what I felt was my purpose, knowing what I felt was my calling. I came up with obstacles from what I would consider close friends and even a mentor. Now, they meant no harm, but they weren't encouraging. They weren't encouraging. They weren't, hey, yeah, you can do anything you want to, you know the speeches.
Right.
My response to young people is, if law enforcement or being a garbage man is something that you want to do, I'm going to tell you like my daddy told me, son, I'm not going to try to persuade you to be anything at all. But whatever you decide you want to be the best. And he used this example, kind of like Martin Luther King Jr. used. He said, if you decide to be on a garbage truck, make people stop and look at you dump that garbage in that truck, because you're doing the best. So whatever you're going to do, all I ask you to do is just be the best. When you wake up early and you stay late, that means you're committed. You're committed to your craft. You're committed to doing your best. Now, your best may not be in the eyes of everybody else, but as long as you know you're doing your best, that's your reward. So whatever you do, make people remember it.
Somebody's always watching you as well, and you, excuse me, you never know, and you may think that it's just a job. I am going to do my best, but it's just a job. I want to do my best because I just want to satisfy myself in knowing that. But you never know when someone else is watching you and it sees that you know how good you are at what you do, or see that you're doing your best, and they might decide to offer you something, a promotion or an elevation or something along those lines.
Your gift will make room for you.
That's it.
If you follow your gift, you're gifted in a certain area, whether it be decorating, being police, or whatever. Your gift will make room for you, and those doors are open. We had one police officer. He didn't stay very long. I recruited him. a raw recruit, got hired, became a police officer, and then he left. He had to leave, and he opened up a business. And it became one of the most popular businesses in Jacksonville. It still is right now. One of the most popular businesses in Jacksonville right now. That was where he's supposed to have been. But he was intrigued with being a police officer. Not a calling, not a purpose, but intrigued.
Right.
And he met all the qualifications to do that. But his niche was something else. Now, I've sat on oral review boards. I sat on oral review boards for 5 or 6 years. And as you know, oral review boards is the final step before they say go to supply and get your uniforms, whatever. And when we're looking at candidates, they've gone through everything. They've passed everything up to that point. Now you're in what we call the hot seat. You're sitting in a seat, and you've got 4 uniformed officers that you're facing answering questions. And some of the things that you look for is we expect them to be nervous. That's going to be that. We expect them to sweat physically, but not profusely.
Right.
We expect them to pause sometime and think, hopefully, think before they answer a question. We know when an ant is canned. You know, I want to help my community. Everybody says that. You can help your community by picking up trash before you get to the police station, you know. So we asked them to elaborate on some of those things. And the majority of the candidates that came through there did a good job, did good enough. And I can't think of maybe one that we didn't recommend to be hired after got through that. And unfortunately, some have made it through there and ended up in federal prison. You know, they knew how to go through the interview process, but we can't see what's in here. We can't see what's in there or what's in the back of their minds. We don't know the real motive. We know what they told us. We've got it written down. It's on record. You know, you want to be a part of the community in a positive way by being a police officer, this, that, and the other. And that's prep talk. You know, you've been prepped. They're going to ask you this, they're going to ask you that. Here's a good response, or here's the response that will get their attention or whatever. But you don't know what's in there.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
My message to young people is that being a police officer, and I'm sure you will agree, is an honorable position.
It is.
It's actually the honor of a lifetime for a lot of us. To be able to serve. It's not about the gun, it's not about the badge, it's not about the authority. And I tell them, you know, if that's what you want, understand the inherent danger that's involved with that kind of work. It's not a Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. Every day you come to work, it's something different. You got to face something different. But whatever it is that you decide you want to be or do, don't let nobody stop you. Just be determined. Just make up your mind. And there are going to be times where you become discouraged. There's going to be times where the person that you thought was going to say something positive, say something negative. That's going to happen. That's just a part of life. But if you are determined and that's what you want, nobody can stop you.
Go for it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I agree 100%, and that's great advice. Before we wrap it up, I did want to acknowledge your family. I know you talked about your immediate family growing up, but you have an immediate family now of your own. So I did want to acknowledge your beautiful wife and your children who have been on this journey with you. Because how long have you been married?
30 years.
30 years. So your wife has been on this journey with you.
Yes.
And it truly takes a good partner with an understanding heart and a compassion for what you have compassion for to be able to go through that with you. So we wanted to acknowledge your family today. And then in closing, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to make some final words if you wanted to. I don't know, you could talk about anything. You've already given us your advice, but if you wanted to talk about, you know, the impact that the sheriff's office had on your life, or, you know, the impact that you feel that you've had on other people, whatever it is, I wanted to give you a final opportunity to talk about that. And I think it's important to note that you have had an impact on a lot of people's lives. You talked about being an instructor at the academy. You talked about running the Defy program. You talked about accreditation. So you really have made an impact on a lot of people's lives.
Thank you. And again, thank you for the opportunity to come and share and and be a part of this. I think it's great what you're doing.
Thank you.
So hats off to you and your staff, which is you. But it sounded good.
My staff and I thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. My final thoughts are, God blessed me to fulfill a dream, to reach my goals. I couldn't have done it without him.
Yeah.
Let me just acknowledge that and say that. Could not have done it without him. It was his grace and mercy that kept me alive, because there were some close calls during that time, which I did not go into. I can recall one night feeling air rush past my head. And that was a bullet. That was a bullet. Whether it was a stray or whether it was somebody aiming or whatever, I don't know. But I just know God said, move your head over to the left a little bit.
Protection.
Yeah. So he's been there the whole time during my tenure with the sheriff's office. It was a privilege and an honor to serve in that capacity. And I sometimes think back, when I think back over my career, when I was in the academy, and they were talking about 20 years, doing 20 years, I'm like, oh, that's a long time.
You couldn't see it.
Wow, that's a long time. And then when you get ready to retire, you're like, where did the time go?
No.
What happened? I mean, 24 years.
And then after you retire, you go, I've been gone that long?
Yeah, I've been gone now for 14 years.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like
it. It doesn't seem like it. I guess because I just graduated from there and went straight to doing media work and still doing it. But Jacksonville is a great city.
Yeah.
Born and raised here. All of my children, I have 3 sons and 2 daughters, all of my children, and 1 grandson. All of my children born and raised here. All of them still live here with the exception of 1. My oldest daughter doesn't live here in Jacksonville. It's a great place to live. It's a great place to work. It's a great place to raise a family. It's a hidden gem as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, it is.
But I would just say, if I was to give a suggestion on a life lesson, and I think I actually have already said it with my previous statement, is that do you.
Yes, do you.
Let's just be plain and simple.
Yeah.
Do you. Do you. Whatever you is, I know that's improper grammar, but whatever you is, whatever defines you, just take the Nike approach. Just do it.
Just do it.
And enjoy doing it. But do it to the best of your ability. To me, retirement is just another word for lateral movement. You can relate to that as well as I have, because both of us have been busy ever since post JSO. Ever since. And my motto is, if you stay busy, you stay healthy.
That's right.
Amen. That's why we're able to look so good.
Thank you.
I just thought we'd throw that in there for y'all.
Thank you.
If it had not been for the George Marshalls, the Anthony Rogers.
And by the way, Anthony Rogers' name keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. He was everybody's hero.
Well, he was a staple.
For real.
He was a staple. He didn't mind telling it like it is. He stood up when we were weak, if you will, or when we didn't have the courage to do it. He was talked about. They called him a loudmouth, or they called him a radical. But usually when you stand up for yourself, that's what they're going to do.
Yeah.
That's what they're going to do, especially if they're in the wrong and you're calling them out. Yeah. So if it had not been for the Anthony Rogers and the George Marshalls and a few others, Nat Glover, we may not have gotten the opportunity that we had back then. And Marvin Young, can't forget Marvin Young, who, as you know, his daughter later on became a police officer. And when I told her...
Young Watkins, we've spoken with Marvin.
Okay, and when I told her, she didn't know, when I told her that her dad was my mentor, she broke down and started crying.
Wow.
She broke down and started crying because she did not know. He had a direct influence on my life as becoming a police officer. So, outside of being a police officer in life in general, do you?
Yeah. Well, I want to say that it's obvious that you have a passion for the city of Jacksonville, that you have truly, no matter what anybody thinks, you've dedicated your life's work to the city. People can say you just wanted to be in politics, or you just wanted to be this or wanted to be that, but at the end of the day, you dedicated your life's work to the city of Jacksonville. And even now, you're still doing things around the city to educate people and enhance the lives and to help, prevent crime in the community and things of that nature. So I just wanted to thank you on behalf of all of us for your 24 years with the Sheriff's Office, and then the work that you've done in the last 14 years for the city of Jacksonville. I wanted to thank you for that. And I wanted to say congratulations, and I wanted to say don't forget, I need to say this to myself too, but don't forget to take a few years later on, not right now, but take a few years later on just to enjoy life.
Yeah, and I intend to do that. And one last comment to your last question. When you're doing things, when you're relevant, you're going to have critics.
That's right.
You're going to have critics. Right. I've had some former colleagues criticize me. I've had some non-colleagues criticize me. But that's because you're doing something that's relevant. Right. And some are going to agree, some are going to disagree.
That's right.
Even if you weren't doing anything relevant, you're still going to have critics.
That's right.
But especially if you're relevant. So I want to say, don't let that discourage you. Don't let if you're not being criticized, then you're not being relevant.
Yeah, the old folks say you can't please everybody.
You can't.
You can't. Somebody's going to always have a complaint.
Yeah.
But again, we thank you. We thank you for taking the time out of your busy day
It's my pleasure.
to speak with us. And hopefully we'll get an opportunity to talk again very soon. But you be blessed.
I look forward to it.
You be blessed, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Okay.